The Story of the Donner Party, 1846 to 1847. Part 1, The Promise of California. In the spring of 1846, America was dreaming westward. From the parlors of Illinois farmhouses to the muddy crossroads of Missouri trading posts, a single word echoed like a hymn: California. A land of mild winters, rich soil, a new life. All it took was the courage to go. George Donner was 62 years old, older than most who made the journey, but age had not dampened his ambition. He was a farmer, a family man, a dreamer. His wife Tamsin, a schoolteacher with sharp eyes and sharper wit, packed her botanical specimens and her children's schoolbooks alongside the flour and the salt pork. They were not desperate people. They were hopeful ones. And that, in the end, may have been their undoing. By May of 1846, the Donner and Reed families had joined a wagon train departing from Independence, Missouri. By the time they reached Fort Laramie in Wyoming, their group had swelled to nearly 90 souls, men, women, and children from all walks of American life, bound together by a shared direction and a shared dream. Part 2, The Shortcut That Wasn't. At Fort Bridger in Wyoming, they made the decision that would seal their fate. A promoter named Lansford Hastings had published a guide promising a bold new route to California, one that would shave weeks off the journey. The Hastings Cutoff, he called it. He had never led a wagon train through it himself. James Reed, one of the group's wealthier members and a forceful personality, urged the party to take it. Others were skeptical. An old frontiersman named James Clyman, who had actually traveled with Hastings, warned them plainly: take the established trail. Do not gamble. They did not listen. The Wasatch Mountains greeted them with walls of tangled brush and rock. Where the trail was supposed to be clear, there was no trail. The men hacked through undergrowth for 18 brutal days to travel just 36 miles. Then came the Great Salt Lake Desert. A shimmering, salt-crusted void that stretched farther than Hastings had promised. Oxen died. Wagons were abandoned. Water ran out. They had lost a month. A month they could not afford. Part 3, Friction on the Trail. By the time they rejoined the main California Trail, tempers were fraying and food was running low. The group was exhausted, behind schedule, and increasingly unable to agree on anything. Tensions boiled over one afternoon when James Reed, following a confrontation with a teamster named John Snyder, drew a knife. Snyder was stabbed and died within minutes. The group voted. Reed, one of their strongest leaders, a man with a family wagon full of provisions, was banished. He was sent away into the desert alone, without a gun. He would survive. He would eventually be among those who came to save the others. But in that moment, the party had exiled one of its best chances. Ahead of them now lay the Sierra Nevada, the final mountain barrier before California. They were already weeks behind where they needed to be. They pushed on, desperately, knowing that the mountain passes closed with snow every winter. They just had to get there before the snow came. The snow came early. Part 4, The Mountains Close. It was late October 1846. The lead wagons had climbed to within miles of the summit pass when the sky darkened and the flakes began to fall. They pressed on. The snow deepened. The oxen lost their footing. The wagons could go no further. They turned back to the lake below, the lake that would one day bear the Donner name, and made camp. They told themselves it was temporary. A few days and the storm would pass. They would try the pass again. But the storms did not pass. They came one after another in a season that would prove to be one of the worst in Sierra Nevada history. By November, the snow was 10 feet deep. By December, 20. The passes were sealed shut. The group split between two camps. Most sheltered near the lake, huddled in crude log cabins and lean-tos barely adequate against the cold. Several miles back along the trail, the Donner families themselves were trapped at Alder Creek, living under canvas buried by snow, George Donner's hand infected and gangrenous from a wound suffered when a wagon wheel splintered. They slaughtered their remaining oxen. They boiled hides for broth. They ate twigs. They rationed and they prayed and they waited. And still the snow came down. Part 5, The Forlorn Hope. In mid-December, 15 of the strongest members of the party attempted to cross the mountains on foot, armed with makeshift snowshoes cut from oxen bones and strips of hide. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. They carried 6 days of rations for a journey that would take nearly a month. Within days, they were lost in the white. The storms found them on the open passes, stripping away body heat and hope in equal measure. Men began to die. First from exhaustion, then from cold. The survivors faced a choice no person should have to face. They had no food. The dead lay in the snow around them. And there were children in the group who needed to survive. They consumed the flesh of the dead. They did so with grief, with prayers, with careful rules. No one would eat a family member's body. It was not savagery. It was survival in its most desperate, most human form. Of the 15 who set out, 7 reached a settlement in California. Among the survivors were 5 women. All 5 of the women who had started made it. Of the men, only 2 survived. The women had rationed more carefully, burned fewer calories, refused to stop moving. Their survival was not luck. It was will. Part 6, The Long Wait. Back at the lake, January arrived with no rescue. The food was gone. People began dying, the old first, then the weak, then those who simply gave up. Tamsen Donner nursed her husband at Alder Creek, refusing to leave him even when she had chances to go. She wrote letters home that she somehow believed might still be delivered. She kept her daughter's lessons going as long as she could, scratching letters in the dirt. The children endured in ways that stunned the adults who witnessed it. Virginia Reed, 13 years old, kept a diary. Patrick Breen, the Irish patriarch of one family, kept a journal too, a spare, matter-of-fact accounting of death and cold that reads today like the most harrowing document in American frontier history. "Froze hard last night," he wrote, again and again. "Mrs. Murphy said here yesterday that she thought she would commence on Milt and eat him. I don't think she has done so yet." They had been stranded for 3 months. Relief had to come soon. Or it would not come at all. Part 7, The Rescuers. James Reed, banished from the party in October, the man they had sent into the desert to die, had reached California and immediately begun organizing a rescue. But funding was hard to find, and the mountains were nearly impassable. It was not until February 18, 1847, that the first relief party reached the lake camp. What they found was beyond description. Survivors who had retreated into the snow so deeply that rescuers had to call out to find them. Children who had not seen sunlight in weeks. Adults reduced to skeletal figures wrapped in rags. One rescuer later wrote that the sight of the camp was the most pitiful thing he had ever witnessed. For relief parties crossed the mountains through February and March. Each time, they carried as many as they could, prioritizing children, and promised to return for the rest. The mountain weather fought them constantly. One party was caught in a storm on the summit and lost 3 children in a single night. Reed himself, on the 3rd relief, nearly did not make it out. Tamsen Donner sent her daughters out with the rescuers but refused to abandon George. When the 4th and final relief party reached Alder Creek in mid-April, George Donner was dead. Tamsen was still there. She was offered a place in the rescue party. She refused it. She would not leave her husband's body. She was never seen alive again. Part 8, Aftermath. Of the 87 members of the Donner Party, 48 survived. Children survived at higher rates than adults. Women survived at higher rates than men. The youngest child to survive was Isabella McMahon, just under a year old. The oldest survivor was Patrick Breen, the journal keeper, who lived to be 73. Virginia Reed, the 13-year-old diarist, wrote a letter to her cousin after her rescue. It contained a piece of advice that has echoed through American history ever since: never take no cutoffs and hurry along as fast as you can. The survivors settled in California, as they had always intended. Some prospered. Some were haunted. The cannibalism became public knowledge quickly, reported in newspapers across the country in lurid detail. Some survivors spent decades trying to deny it. Others simply refused to discuss those months at all. A few, the pragmatic ones, pointed out plainly that they had done what they had to do, and that was that. Epilogue: What the Snow Remembers. The Donner Party story endures not because it is a tale of monsters, but because it is a tale of ordinary people placed in extraordinary circumstances. They were farmers and merchants, mothers and children, dreamers on the edge of the continent. They made bad decisions, some catastrophic ones, but they also showed extraordinary courage, love, and endurance. Tamsen Donner, who stayed behind to die with her husband, was not a tragic figure. She was a woman who made a choice that was entirely her own, with full knowledge of the cost. The forlorn hope who crossed those mountains in December, eating snow and grief and worse, were not monsters, they were parents trying to bring help to their children. The Sierra Nevada is beautiful in the winter. The snow falls soft and deep, and the passes are quiet, and the trees stand still under their white weight. It is hard, standing there today, to imagine what it was to be trapped there. To look at those peaks and know that on the other side was everything you had ever wanted, and that the mountain simply would not let you through. The Donner Party went west for the same reason everyone goes west, for a better life. The mountains just asked a price no one should have had to pay. End.